Howdy, this is Mackenzie Franklin from SideGame LLC here in Colorado Springs, Colorado. We're continuing the Best of 2022 list series with one of my favorite lists. This is the top 10 solo board games of 2022. If you haven't subscribed to the channel already, please make sure that you do. It is the best way to help us grow. And for those of you already subscribed, thank you so much for the continuous support. Let's talk about the best solo board games from 2022. Before we begin, I have two honorable mentions. The first one is going to Clever Forever. This is the fourth in the Clever series, one of my favorite roll and write games where it's a simple decision of you're rolling dice and picking a value, and that value, the higher it is, the less options you have in the future. It's a simple system that works so well, and this new edition is going to have you with new mini games that are going to reward you for diving deeper into each of them. It's a unique taste on the Clever series, but I wanted to make sure that I put this as an honorable mention because seeing the frequency that we're getting this games, I didn't want every single year to have this game featured on the list. But I do recommend the entire Clever series highly, and this is one of my new favorites. This is Clever Forever, my first honorable mention. My second honorable mention goes to Batman The Dark Knight Returns, the game. Now, this one was hard to place for me, and it's honestly my number 11 on the entire list, but I wanted to be upfront with you on what I think of the game as a whole. Now, this game is awesome. You're going to be playing as the Dark Knight, going through the entire Dark Knight Returns comic book setting, and you'll be going through scenario after scenario with a persistent board that has you actually writing on it, making these paths and getting new upgrades that will carry on from scenario to scenario. Now, the reason I wanted to talk about this here in the honorable mentions is I think that the initial play of the scenario is awesome, of the campaign is awesome, but I think that after that, repeat plays of the campaign, it is too easy in my opinion. Now, that being said, the campaign, you can, once you play through it once, you can start playing what are called the nightmare missions. There are single shot scenarios for each of the different chapters, and this is my preferred way to play this. It offers a new unique challenge with a new fresh starting setup. You do lose some of that interconnectivity of the campaign, but I think that this brings that actual challenge of Batman, especially once you've learned the system of Batman The Dark Knight Returns. So I wanted to put this one on the list because I think this game is awesome, but I prefer those nightmare solo single shot scenarios as opposed to the entire overarching campaign, but it is a good way to learn it. So that is my number 11, Batman The Dark Knight Returns, the board game. And now we'll get into the full list with number 10. My number 10 goes to Resist. This has you playing as the Spanish Maquis, who are leading the resistance and trying to liberate your land. Now, the gameplay has you playing a deck building game where you're going to be going through scenario to scenario. They are single shot, trying to complete this objective by using your dwindling resources. It's a game of attrition as you try to complete different objectives, and every time you open up your hand of cards, you'll have to decide if you want to play your cards as hidden cards with weaker abilities on this red side here, or if you play them as revealed. You'll get the purple on the right side here. Now, this choice is a big one, similar to something like Gloomhaven. Once you use those revealed cards, they're going to be removed from your deck, so timing is so important, and managing the attrition of your characters to do powerful actions is a cornerstone of this game. My favorite way to play this game is with the drafting variant and the scenario mode. In the drafting variant, you're going to get to build your deck of freedom fighters before the game begins and craft and customize your deck for the scenario that's at hand. And then, playing in that scenario mode, you'll have a unique objective that you must complete, and therefore you know exactly when you actually want to be using these super powerful cards. It's an awesome choice, and you have lots of hidden information, so plenty of risk, but the gameplay is short, simple, and it makes a lot of sense. It uses mechanisms you're familiar with, but also that awesome choice of choosing between the revealed and hidden. The art style is incredible. This was featured highly on my best artwork of the year, and I wanted to make sure I shouted it out here. That's my number 10 solo game. That is Resist. My number 9 goes to Twilight Inscription, a roll and write of epic proportions. This has you playing with the Twilight Imperium theme, but in a roll and write fashion. You are going to have these 4 gigantic boards in front of you, and it's up to you to manage all 4 of their different scoring potential to gain dominance in the galaxy. In this first board up here, you're going to be able to do some navigating through space, visiting planets, and then when you've found those planets, you'll be able to mark them on the right board here, which is going to give you different resources for completing rows and columns. On the board on the bottom right, you're going to get even more resources, goods, passive generation, and then on the bottom left, you have Warfare. Now, Warfare here is going to give you lots of options for beating your neighbors in sort of a Seven Wonders duel style in the competitive game, but in the solo mode, you have an AI opponent that is going to be ramping up with you the entire time that you play. The solo mode here balances an objective system as well as a pacing system, where you're going to be using your dice results that are rolled every time, so the upkeep is marginal on the solo solo mode, and I think it works brilliantly. You also have the competition for the goals based on how the things are rolled, but pairing that with the different factions of the characters means that this is going to be one that you're going to be coming back to a long time. You've got the different faction abilities, runes that are going to give you special events that are going to be unique from game to game, paired with the pacing of the specific AI that you choose to go against. My favorite part about this game is actually the way that you're activating your boards. Every round you'll get some symbols and you'll pick one of these boards that you want to activate, and then you'll roll the dice and continue the activations on that board. So it's a bit of push your luck onto whether or not those symbols that get rolled are going to be of use for you on the board that you've chosen. I love that locking in sensation and how you're progressing on just one thing, but how some bonuses in one area are going to lead to different abilities in another. For example, you may get technology in one section that unlocks a new type of worship that you can get in another, or you may be able to get access to further bonuses you didn't have before. I love the interconnectivity of the different boards here, paired with the different factions. This is a roll and write game that you are going to revisit quite a bit. That is my number 9, Twilight Inscription. My number 8 goes to Mythic Mischief. In this game, you play as Mythic, students at a magical university. Think something like Monsters University, where you're going to have mummies and ghouls and all sorts of creatures that are playing games at school. And the game that they like the most is to taunt the Tome Keeper into catching your friends, and if you do so, you're going to score points for your team, and it's a race to 10 points, trying to taunt the Tome Keeper to catch your opponents. Now, the solo mode does a wonderful job of adding randomness to the game with these detention cards. They're going to give you little objectives that you can plan for, and if you're able to guess correctly, or if you're able to plan for all of them, you can avoid being caught yourself by the enemy AI. My favorite thing about this game, though, has to be the way the different mythics feel. When you take your place as the character, the mythic that you choose not only has this cute backstory for each of their different characters, but you'll also be using an intuitive dice system in order to take actions that are specific to your characters. For example, if you play as the ghost, every single faction has a way to manipulate the opponents, but the ghosts do it in their own unique way. They're going to have a possess action, which means they can go into an adjacent space and then scare the opponents into other orthogonal areas. It's an awesome way to get around characters you may normally not have been able to. You also have ways to manipulate the bookshelves in the room to change the path of the Tome Keeper. You'll have your own special abilities that you can use potentially once or multiple times per game, and then in the second half of the game you unlock another thematic ability. For example, the vampires have a way that they can suck blood and get extra actions when they pass through other players. It's an awesome system and one that you're going to want to continue exploring, and paired with the detention system, it's going to have a lot of varied gameplay that keeps you engaged and keeps you guessing as to what the AI is going to do. It's my favorite way to play Mythic Mischief. That's my number 8, Mythic Mischief. My number 7 goes to Three Sisters, a game where you play as a farmer who are using the Three Sisters method of growing plants. This means that you're going to have pumpkin, and you're also going to have corn and beans that are all working together to thrive. And this is replicated through the use of planting phases and rain phases, where you're going to be able to plant in different plots of land, and once certain plants are growing, it's going to allow you to grow the others in tandem with them. At its core, this game uses an action system in the solo mode where you're rolling dice, and your opponent is going to be drafting dice back and forth with you, and whenever your opponent drafts a die, it's going to reduce the amount of options that you get on your turn. So they are going to be chasing down the opposite sides of the tracks that you are working on. So it pushes you to prioritize jumping through certain tracks and getting bonuses, but have no fear, bonuses are galore in this game. When you take an action, not only do you get to plant in the fields of the dice that you take, but you also take the action on the board. Based on the values, that determines where they're seated onto the board every round, and you'll be taking lots of bonus actions. This is in the same line of games as Fleet the Dice game, so every time you do something, you'll generally be able to produce goods or get some additional effect out of it, and in this one, there's even technologies that benefit you from going down specific lines. My favorite part about this game are actually getting those different technologies. There's some that benefit the fruit tracks, some that help out with the apiary, and some that will help out with perennials, so it's pushing you down these different thresholds that you can explore, and there's even a cool little expansion that adds weather to the game to add to that unpredictability. It's an awesome experience. It's one that's going to have you thinking every single turn on how you can maximize your bonus actions, because you will be getting a lot of bonus actions, and it's so much fun to decide where you're going to put your different resources into. So that's my number 7, Three Sisters. My number 6 goes to Oathsworn Into the Deepwood. This has you playing as the Free Company, a group of Oathsworn who has vowed to protect the people of the Deep Wood. This is a mix between something like The Witcher and Attack on Titan, honestly. You have this vegetation that's surrounding the entire planet, and the communities of people that are still alive are found inside of these tall, walled bastions, these areas, these castles that are protected from the terrors of the forest. Now, you are monster hunters. You are going to be going from city to city, helping out people, and hopefully resolving any issues that come up along the way. Now, the game itself is played in two different halves. You're going to have a story half that's played on this map up here, and based on the decisions you make here, it's going to lead into that next phase, the showdown. Now, before we get into that, there's a narration on an app that's also for this that has Jorah Mormont from Game of Thrones narrating the experience for you, and it's done so well. Can't recommend this one enough, and it's totally free. Amazing. So that story is just icing on the cake that leads into this amazing combat system. Now, the combat here has you playing as the Oathsworn, trying to take out the monsters as efficiently as possible. They have different dice here that represent the hit locations on the characters and different body parts of the creatures, and each creature is going to behave differently. So no spoilers here, but they are awesome in the way that they work. Now, on top of that, your characters are also going to be unique in the way that they work. For example, one of my favorite characters is the Huntress, who has these falcon tokens that they can send out to manipulate and move not only friendly characters but also enemies, moving people around and pecking for additional damage. I love the combo nature that you can use with these tokens. And if you don't want to play with every single character being a little bit more complicated, there's also options for these smaller, I forget exactly what they're called, but buddy modes, companions. They're these tiny little cards that still have powerful abilities and effects, but just less options and less management that you have to do on the player side. So you can ramp up the complexity as much as you want. And for each character that you do decide to use one of these full boards with, you also are going to get a hand of action cards that you're going to have to manage as you put them into a battle flow system where they're going to travel around your cards and be able to interact with the board in unique ways. If you're able to combo them enough, you can refresh them more frequently, which will give you access to your more powerful cards more quickly. I love the way that the flow system works, but my favorite part about this game is the way that the dice system works. Anytime that you resolve a test or attack, you'll be able to pick as many dice as you want of the white kind. And then based on your upgrades, you can grab more advanced dice. After you decide how many dice you roll them, and then based on how many misses you get, that determines your successes. If you get 2 misses, no matter how many dice you rolled, you automatically fail the test. But as soon as you make that roll and you see that you only have 1 miss, you have passed. There's also a system similar to something like Gloomhaven where instead of using dice, you can use hit location cards and you'll reveal them from a deck, so that way the different distributions are allocated appropriately, so you get the exact amount of variance, but it's up to you how you want to roll for every single test. You can grab a grip of dice, you can use the cards, you can use a combination of both, and based on how many successes that you've seen with the different decks, you can game the system where, hey, maybe you got really lucky on the white deck of cards, and it's more beneficial to just roll the white dice because you know that you have better odds because there's only misses left in the white deck. And then there are even cards that allow you to reshuffle the decks, which can reset your odds to make for more consistent shots in the future. This is an awesome system, and the fact that you're not having to do a lot of counting until you've actually succeeded feels so satisfying. You don't have to count just to see if you miss, but as soon as you roll, you know right then and there if you passed, and you know exactly how awesome that's going to feel because of how many dice you rolled if you actually did pass. I love the dice system in Oathsworn Into the Deepwood, and I want to see it in more games. That is my number 6, Oathsworn Into the Deepwood. My number 5 goes to Ascension Tactics, the miniatures deck building game. This has you playing as champions, trying to complete different objectives where you'll be sending them out into different lanes, fighting different creatures through a deck building system. Now, this is based on the Ascension system, so it's a deck building game that's been out for a long time, followed Dominion, innovated the market of cards that's continuously flowing, but this takes everything that the Ascension system has learned, adds a map and a board and different objective-based systems that you're using these cards for. You have 2 currency, one for buying new cards to put in your deck, and the second currency for activating your champions. You'll maneuver them onto the board, trying to defeat your opponents, and in the solo mode, the way that it interacts with you is through the solo cards. Just like you're going to be ramping up, the solo opponent is going to ramp up based on how many turns it's already taken. So it's going to get more and more challenging as time passes. I love how simple this system is to use. You'll have these unique champions that are for the opponent, and then you'll shuffle this deck of red cards, and based on what you reveal, it'll determine what the enemy does. I love how easy it is to play, but still how challenging it is. There's a unique campaign mission that you can play as well that is going to have you assemble your team, getting special abilities and upgrades that you get to pick that will maybe manipulate your effects during the game or your startup, get you on the ground running from scenario to scenario, and you'll assemble a group of heroes to fight down major bosses through different multi-scenario campaigns. You can just play single-shot scenarios, you can play this large campaign mode, but it's a game that's not only easy to play, but it's intuitive and it's a lot of fun, easy to manage, and it's one that you're going to find yourself playing a lot. I love how this system works. It feels great to play, and my favorite part about this game, though, is actually the ambush system on the cards. There's a lot of cards that, of course, you want to add to your deck because their powers are so strong, but there are a lot of cards that also have an ambush ability that activate when you purchase them. This is a huge implication because it just means that the order of your turn matters that much more, because you could potentially buy a card with an ambush effect, trigger it, buy something else, reveal a new ambush effect, trigger that, and that's going to guide into your decision paths and what cards that you're going to want to add to your deck, maybe for their future impact or for their impact right now. I love that decision on deciding between future and now. It is wonderful and done perfectly in Ascension Tactics, the miniatures deck building game. That's my number 5. My number 4 goes to Massive Darkness 2, Hellscape. This has you playing as warriors of the dark who've trained to fight back the evil Hellions. You're going to go from scenario to scenario in a Diablo-like sense, hacking and slashing monsters and getting so much loot you won't know what to do with it. Now, the game is actually built upon what feels like the foundation of Cthulhu Death May Die. You'll have dice that you'll be rolling for yourself and the enemies that you can manipulate with your different effects and abilities, but what makes this game truly unique are the characters and the way that they interact with these solid core systems. For example, say that you pick to be the Druid, one of my favorite characters. This one has the ability every turn to switch into a different form. You're going to have different level ups and abilities that will affect these different forms, and that's just for the Druid character. You're going to have to manage moving between the different forms and the limitations and powers that gives. You may be the Berserker who's using your different health markers for more benefits. You're trying to take as much damage as possible. Or you're the Rogue who's doing a bit of deck building, bag building. It is so awesome that there are at least 10 classes that are all unique in the way that they play, but the fact that the core system of Massive Darkness 2 is so solid makes this one that you're going to want to play as much as possible. I love the game's asymmetry, that core system, but my favorite part about this game, aside from the asymmetry, has to be the loot system. Every time that you find a treasure, you're drawing from these loot decks, getting new items, and you're customizing yourself the entire time you're playing. As you get better and the enemies get more difficult, you are also going to level up the loot decks that you're pulling from, meaning that you're going to have access to more powerful abilities. This is a solo dungeon crawler. It's set up for solo as well, where you're going to control just a single character, be focusing on your levels ups and your movement through the dungeon, and the way that it balances this is it gives you extra actions that you would normally get in the multiplayer cooperative mode. I love the way that they've integrated the solo system here, and I think it works perfectly. That is my number 4, Massive Darkness 2, Hellscape. My number 3 goes to Vagrant Song, a campaign game where you play as vagrants aboard a ghost train. It's up to you to confront these spirits and try to restore their humanity while holding on to your own. Now, the game is scenario-based, where you're going to be going into different missions, setting up the board, which is made of 3 train cards with terrain. I'm not going to show you any spoilers here, no worries, but each of them has their own mini objectives that you must complete, as well as events and unique playstyles to these spirits that you'll encounter. Now, the game is focused on a player system of coin management, where you're putting coins on different actions, and based on how many coins you have there, it'll determine the strength of those actions. You also have this unique item system that's called the Bindle, where not only are you digging in there for items that you can use that may have different effects from scenario to scenario, but it also determines how the enemies are going to be taking their actions. So it's up to you to not only manage this bag, because it also determines when the enemy will cycle their actions and get an additional bonus. So it's not only about timing, but also utility. And my favorite part about this entire game, though, has to be the abilities in the game. As you can see, there's lots of slots here on the sides of your characters and on the bottom for items, and every time you get the option for one of these different effects, it's not necessarily going to be something that's stronger than the last ability that you took. It's not just a numbers game, it has to do with interesting effects and implications on the battlefield. Once again, no spoilers here, because a lot of these effects are awesome and integrated into the scenarios you'll play, but every time you have to pick between one of your abilities, it hurts just as much to lose one, but it's also just unique and interesting, and it's going to push you into the next scenario, excited to try out your new bells and whistles. It's a game that has so much longevity with the different scenarios. It's easy to set up and play, easy to get into, and easy to pick up and get back into. So that's one of the things that I appreciate about this game is its pacing. It's a boss battling game at its heart that does have that scenario structure, but the scenarios make it so it's going to be one that you can pull out every so often and enjoy, but one that you'll probably want to be keeping on the table for a while as you get lost in its world. The art is amazing. I love the storytelling in it and the way that the events integrate with the scenarios and bring out the flavor. It's such a thematic experience that I need to recommend it as often as I can. One of my favorite campaign games to come out, and one of my favorite campaign games, period. This is Vagrant Song, my number 3. My number 2 goes to Frostpunk, the board game. A huge surprise for me. This has you playing in a post-apocalyptic setting. The cold has come. Every single community is now going to be surrounding themselves around these large generators, shoveling coal inside, and using all of that heat to power the different actions. You'll be getting resources, using those resources to complete the scenario at hand, and trying to ultimately survive in this new reality. Frostpunk, the board game, has you playing scenario to scenario, trying to make it to the very end by using your resources efficiently to build buildings and then utilize the different resources and aspects of those buildings to have a thriving society. Now, this game itself is gigantic. You're going to have lots of different things to manage, from the food that your community eats to the sickness levels because of the freezing cold. You'll have the generator itself that could blow up at any minute, different expeditions that you can send people out. You have unrest as well as hope that you're having to manage, and then every single turn you'll also be faced with the choice of what is going to happen in your society. You'll be drawing a card that will give you some sort of dilemma, and it's up to you whether or not you want to actually interact with this dilemma. Now, sometimes it can have you just shuffling new cards into the deck. Sometimes you can ignore it and your society will hate you for it, and it's up to you to prepare for these actual things. I love the way that the laws are introduced into this game, where every single action you take has a consequence. Yes, you can add food additives, put some sawdust in your food, but it's going to make the people hate you, and that's something that you gotta just deal with if that's what you're gonna do to survive. Every choice has a consequence, and I think that's present in this game. Now, as I said before, this was a huge surprise to me because the game is extremely punishing. When you set up a game for this, you're gonna feel on top of the world. You're gonna have all of these resources. You can take the first couple of turns building things, getting abilities, but then the storm hits. Then it starts getting harder to heat different buildings, and now you have to start making tough decisions. And once things start falling and crumbling, it's going to continue that way. It's going to end up just wrapping up all of a sudden. There's so many different lost conditions, but it's a game that's so engaging because you are the one in charge of this entire community that as soon as it finishes, you're going to set it up and just start playing right again. What an awesome sensation to be so engrossed in an experience and immediately want to try again. That's the feeling that I get when I play Frostpunk, the board game. I just want to keep playing and see if I can do better the next time. It's a satisfying experience throughout, the constant decisions that you have to make. And one of my favorite parts about this game, whether it be the different event cards that you interact with or the scenarios, is that your decisions have lasting impacts that you don't just happen to you, but maybe you have to prepare for. I'm just going to be vague here, not give any spoilers, but say that you make a decision that says that you have to do something in your community. It's more than just saying that you have to do it. You have to put in the effort and the time and the resources, which are, may I remind you, super scarce in this post-apocalyptic economy. And you have to actually make those things happen. And if you don't, the game will say, hey, did you do this thing? You didn't? Oh, well, you clearly are going to get this terrible thing because you promised that you would do this thing, but you didn't. Oh, it happens all the time. And when you pull it off, it feels so gratifying. And when you don't, it sucks, but you're going to restart and try again because this game is so much fun to play. From start to finish, this is going to be an experience that is engaging as you go through the different phases, deal with the different consequences, and then try to complete the different scenarios. The scenarios are varied. They have different setups where every single unique society is going to influence the way that the scenario goes. It's amazing, honestly. I love how this entire system works. The buildings make sense and are straightforward once you get the system down. My recommendation is to go through a single scenario and just get destroyed absolutely, because then you'll start thinking about the implications of every single one of your actions and how they will feed into actually winning a scenario. So I love Frostpunk, the board game. It's a game that I'm going to see myself returning to a lot for this upcoming year and hopefully for then on. Love Frostpunk, the board game. That is my number 2. Even with all that excitement for Frostpunk, the board game, it is not my number 1 solo board game. This is another huge surprise for me. My favorite solo board game of 2022. This is Paperback Adventures. This is a roguelike deck building game where you're playing as some literary hero, going from encounter to encounter, playing 6 overall in the entire experience, leveling up your deck in between encounters, and trying your best to survive the onslaught. And the game is played in each scenario having you fight against a single baddie. These baddies have a ability that you get to see beforehand and you can prepare for, and each turn starts with you assembling a word. You'll be able to use this word to generate symbols, attack, and then the enemy will fight back. You'll go back and forth until one of you are defeated. Your health will carry on to the next mission, so it's up to you to manage your health while also gaining upgrade resources so that you can improve your deck for the future fights. Because you are not only going to level up every single round, but you're also going to be fighting against enemies who get progressively stronger. As you can see on the bottom here, the game features a splay system when you're creating your words, where not only are you looking for the letters, but also the symbols on their left or right side. Based on how you organize your word, it's going to generate defensive or offensive symbols that you're going to use in that moment. In addition, whatever you play on top of your word is going to get a special ability, and each of the different characters has special abilities that are unique to them. It gives you a unique feel for the different characters, but in tandem with the enemies that you're fighting, the items that you'll find, and the upgrades that you'll obtain, every experience will be very different but also engaging. One thing I love about this game is the way they integrate the word system in the entire experience. It allows you some effects and abilities that you would never see in a game like this before. Talking about vowels and consonants, special ways that you're able to create words or use wilds. I love the versatility of the different cards and effects and how unique they are to a word game setting like this. Another thing that I love about this game is the upgrade system. Every single time you finish an encounter, you'll be able to go into the shop here, and each shop gives you the options to either get new letters or new items or MacGuffins. Now, items are effects that you can use before you create your word to get special abilities, and as mentioned before, they are either going to be dealing with the enemy, yourself, dealing damage, generating symbols, or having to do with the actual construction of the word. Oh my gosh, they're very interesting, and the fact that you're incorporating all of this means there's so much variety with the different effects. You'll also have these MacGuffins that are passive abilities that you're going to want to collect, and then you have new letters that are going to replace your deck. And one of the cool implications of that is the fact that every time you construct your deck, you are thinking about what words you can make in the future. If I add a bunch of M's into my deck, I'm not going to be able to spell a lot of crazy words. So you're trying to almost construct a deck that is able to generate consistent words while also getting the symbols and effects that you want and need. So awesome. You also can even go further and upgrade these letters, improving the deck that you already have. You can see they have a little upgrade icon on the bottom here that will say what they do when you actually flip them. This is brilliant. But my favorite part about this game has to be just the entire incorporation of the letter system. There are penalty letters that can be added into your deck, and these are going to make it so it's harder to actually build words because you have all these letters that are just so out of place and don't fit with your deck, but you want to use because they have negative implications if you hold on to them. You have the wild cards that can add to the difficulty or decrease the difficulty based on the sort of game that you want to play. These make it so that they're a flexible resource that you can use to spell words, or if you don't use them, you get an additional bonus. And then each of the enemies has one of these yellow vowel cards that is the enemy weakness, and if you're able to use that, you get additional bonuses, and you can even pop them to gain some additional effect of skipping an action that you could potentially get ruined by, but then you've lost that vowel for the rest of the turn. I can't put into words just how brilliant the entire design of this game is, the integration of the letters with this dungeon crawl system. If you've played a game like Slay the Spire, this roguelike atmosphere is something that I love, and the fact they've been able to take that experience and put it into 6 single shot encounters, gaining levels ups and seeing those level up in practice immediately what a satisfying game. The way that you are having to manage your deck and making sure that you have enough resources to fight a single scenario. You can't just play all defense. You have to be offensive. Otherwise, that you are going to eventually run out of cards in your deck, while also managing your resources from mission to mission. You have different characters, different level ups, different things that are going to actually sort of campaign legacy like. They're going to last from game to game. Once you defeat certain bosses, you'll be able to add new treasures and effects to your decks, and you'll get these boss MacGuffins, which is just even more insane passive abilities. It is such a fun experience that you can sit down and have an amazing session of, and then be done. You've had this incredible experience of leveling up, using the abilities that you just earned when you leveled up, and seeing how they've react while getting to these terrifying final bosses. I love the entire experience of Paperback Adventures, and I think it's the best word game, period, and my favorite solo board game from 2022. Oh my gosh, what an awesome year for solo gaming. So that was my list. Those are my top 10 board games, solo board games for 2022. I'd love to hear what you think about the list and what were your favorite solo board games from the year. Please let me know what you think down in the comments below. What do you think of my list? What do you think of the placement of my games? And were there any surprises on this list for you? I know for sure there were for me. I'm curious to hear what 2022 had for you that you enjoyed so much. But thank you so much for watching SideGame Strong.